I have tried to film this video 4 times so far. Each time around 30 seconds, I find myself completely trailing off, not even sure of what I am saying anymore. And so I am going to start the 5th attempt as if I am already in the video, and we are going to see if that will help me to not completely go off the rails and start saying something that I am not even sure of the meaning of. And I'm already doing it again. Anyway, today I would like to haul a couple new books and talk about 2 books that I finished reading last week. The books that I would like to haul I purchased yesterday, and I really don't have a whole lot to say about them because they are very new to me. I just went to a bookstore, stood in the fiction section, and picked up the books that sort of jumped out at me. A couple of the titles I did know from Goodreads and I purchased intentionally, but the rest really were just purchased on a whim, basically based off of the premise on the back of the book. So I will start with the book haul, and then I will go into the reading update portion of the video talking about the 2 novels that I read last week. So the first of the books to haul is The Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. This is one of the books that I was already somewhat familiar with through some Goodreads reviews, also just other people here on booktube talking about it. So I already was sort of aware of this book. However, I was not aware of the sort of the plot. And so when I read sort of more about the book, obviously it sounded really interesting to me. This is a sort of a weaving of historical fiction and science fiction, and a little bit of literary fiction sort of all put together. It's also generational, spans a really long timeline, which is something that I really love. So it has, it's described here as having elements of time travel and elements of sort of metaphysics, and it deals with a lot of just sort of the human condition. So I'm really eager to get to this one. I did put this on my sort of coming up next bookshelf on Goodreads, so I will be getting to this really soon. The next was a book that just caught my eye that I was not aware of at all before, and that is The Night Ship by Jess Kidd. And I loved the cover as well. This is a historical fiction novel based off of a true story of a Dutch shipwreck. So it's 2 different timelines, one set in 1629 and the other in 1989, and then they're sort of weaved together to create one cohesive story. So I'm really eager to get to this one. I haven't heard of Jess Kidd before at all, but when I got home, I looked her up on Goodreads, and her other books look really interesting as well. So this may not be the only book of hers that I read. Next is David Mitchell's The Thousand Autumns of Jacob de Zoet. I do hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but I absolutely loved this cover. It's really the first thing that jumped out to me, and then when I read the synopsis, I knew I wanted to read it. It is set in Japan in the year 1799, and the main premise, our protagonist, Jacob, is a young man who is going to Japan to try to prove himself and to sort of earn enough money to win back his wealthy fiance in Holland. And then lots of other things happen, but that's sort of the top line of the synopsis here on the back. So I'm really excited to get to this. I have read very little about Japan. I have read very little, even historical fiction in this time period. So I'm really eager to give this one a try. Next is The History of Love by Nicole Krauss. And this actually, I started this morning, and this is my current read at the moment, and I am absolutely loving it. It's another sort of dual timeline novel where we have two different stories with 2 different protagonists that then they sort of start weaving together, and each story affects the other. It's absolutely beautifully written, and I'll talk more about this once I finish it, which will hopefully be in the next couple of days, if not today. The next one on the list is Joshua Cohen's The Netanyahus, and I do hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And this is an account of a minor and ultimately even negligible episode in the history of a very famous family. And this is the winner of the Pulitzer Prize and the National Jewish Book Awards as well. It's also New York Times 100 notable books of 2021. So there are a lot of sort of badges here. Usually these types of stickers drive me crazy, but I'm okay with it this time. So this is a sort of a mix of historical fiction, sort of historical nonfiction, essay. It's sort of very, very layered from what I have read about it on Goodreads. I'm really excited to get to this one. I have not read anything by this author before, and so I'm really excited to give this one a try. And last is the nonfiction title, and that is The Underworld: Journeys to the Depths of the Ocean by Susan Casey. And I've had this on my Goodreads list for a while, saw it on the shelf, so I knew it was meant to be. I picked it up. I'm really excited to get to this one. I'm getting back into reading a lot of nonfiction works about the ocean and deep sea exploration. It's a topic that I find really, really fascinating. And so I'm hoping that this is going to be just an absolutely astounding read and that I'll learn some new things. Absolutely love the cover as well. And based off of the reviews that I have read, I think this is going to be worth it. So that is the last of the books to haul. Now for the 2 books that I read last week. The first that I finished was The Overstory by Richard Powers. And this is one that I hauled recently. I was gifted this for Christmas. And this is a novel that I have very strong sort of mixed feelings about, which is not usually the case for me. Usually I can pick one side, either liking or disliking, but on this I am very, very torn. And the reasons I'm torn is because I feel like this is 2 different books. And based off of some of the reviews I read after finishing this, I think I am not the only one who feels this way. I absolutely loved part 1. In part 1, we get a series of short stories, and in each short story, there is some direct connection between the characters of the short stories and trees. And the way that Richard Powers weaves those 2 things together is absolutely beautiful. So as I was reading part 1, I was sure that this novel was going to be one of not only one of my favorites of the year, but one of my favorites of all time based off of those first short stories. And then moving into part 2, we start getting a much broader narrative that weaves together all of the characters that we met in the short stories into a singular narrative. And it's in part 2 that I personally started to feel that the novel was losing its magical quality and was losing what I was loving about part 1, which sort of was the with keeping the stories more like short stories and keeping them very powerfully written and short. They're very impactful. I felt moving into part 2 that it was stretched a little far, and that I don't want to say that it was boring, but there were definitely times when I felt that scenes were dragging on a little longer than they needed to. And it's very much an environmental novel. And so for part 2, I feel that because the subject matter that Richard Powers is writing about is so important, conservation of our deep growth forests, our old growth forests, a very important message. I feel that the message started to become the primary target over the sort of the story and the characters. And so the characters sort of took a backseat, the story took a backseat, and I feel that it sort of got a little lost in the narrative. And so at least for me, in part 2, I started to lose interest a little bit in the characters and had a feeling that it was a little bit it was getting a little bit long, but part one was absolutely beautiful. So I would recommend this novel, and I would recommend highly that you read part one. And the rest of the novel is fantastic, and I did enjoy it. But I felt that I read two novels when I read this one. Then the next book that I finished last week was The Night Watchman by Louise Erdrich. And this is also a winner of the Pulitzer Prize. And I read this on ebook and on audiobook. And this is my first of Louise Erdrich's books to read. This was recommended to me by Goodreads after finishing the Overstory, and I read the synopsis, and it sounded really interesting. So I just wanted to give it a try. And this is a historical fiction novel loosely based on the life of the author's grandfather, who was a night watchman at a factory in North Dakota. And it is about her grandfather's fight against the U.S. government's enacted bill to dispossess the Chippewa Nation's land holdings in North Dakota, and sort of to dissolve their tribe's land holdings, essentially. And so we get that as the main bedrock of the narrative, and then we get lots of other stories woven into that of the other members of this North Dakotan Chippewa tribe. And the writing is absolutely beautiful. The characters are compelling. I listened to it on audio, which was narrated by the author, and really loved her narration. I feel that when an author reads a book, it's a different reading, because you get sort of the author's intentional inflections and how they want the dialogue phrased and spaced. So it was a very special listening experience, and I would highly recommend this as well. So that is everything for the book hauls and what I have been reading. As for what I'm currently reading, I am still reading, let's see if I can pull it back up here from the book haul. Here it is, The History of Love. So this will be my read for at least the rest of today, and probably going into next week. And then I am still reading Anna Karenina for Classics and Company. I fell a little behind with that, but I'm hoping to finish that this upcoming week, and then start into Moby Dick for the first reading of Classics and Company's 2024 read-along. If you are not familiar with Classics and Company, it is a year-long reading event that we did last year that I co-hosted along with a fellow booktuber and novella, and it went really well, and we all enjoyed it, so we wanted to do another one this year in 2024. And if you're interested in checking out our reading list for the year, I will leave a link in the description down below to our Discord server, where you can find our full reading list for the year. And if you want to join along for any of those reads, it is completely commitment free. There is no expectation of you being active in the Discord server chat at all. There's even no expectation that you read the entire book with us or follow along with the entire reading month. You can really do whatever you want. It's very free form. We're just happy to have as many people as want to join us. So I'll leave that link down in the description below. And that's everything for this video. I hope you enjoyed. Feel free to leave a comment down below if you would like, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now, and happy reading.